Hey coaches, Coach Simpson, welcome to my YouTube station. Most weeks I've kind of rotated between offensive materials and a little bit of defense. This week I'm going to be focusing mainly on the defensive side of the ball with a lot of terminology. Terminology that you hear a lot that as a young coach I didn't know I had to learn all of this stuff. And so some of this stuff you may already know, and maybe I can give you just a couple things you can pick up from it. Some of this for you younger coaches may be completely new to you, but understanding basic terminology on both sides of the ball is very important. So last week talked about offensive line, basic terminology. This week we're going to talk about general defensive terminology. If you haven't already, you can go to my website. I just put out, actually just came in, I'm very excited, my 3-4 book. So if you're interested in specifically how we do things defensively, or just want to study some defensive material, I've got material there on my website, or if you can go to CoachTube and you can get more in depth if that's something you're interested in. But today, we're going to kind of focus on talking about gap integrity. We're going to move through this week. We're going to talk about gaps. What are gaps? What does that mean? What are you trying to accomplish as a defense? What are keys? Talk about defensive keys all the time. What does that mean? Leverage. That's a word I use a lot defensively. What is leverage, or what is your fit defensively? I think those are very sometimes undercoached or not coached enough in our defenses. And then cover blank match. What does that mean? You hear this a lot of, your pattern read, or you hear this match or zone, or when somebody says we're going to be in cover 3 match or cover 2 match or cover 4, whatever it is, what does that mean? Okay, and then finally force. What does it mean to be a force player in today's world on defense? So I'm going to slide over here. Today we're going to talk about gap integrity, something that most people would refer to, just basically in any defense you'll run. I put a 3-4 because that's what we run, but you could run this with a 4 front, and whatever defensive scheme you come up with, you have to be sound in gap integrity. And what that means is the offense by formation is going to produce running gaps. And defensively, you have to have an answer for how you're going to fit those gaps. So there are different things you can do. So let's talk about 101, what gaps are first. If you go from the center to the guard, that is the A gap. If you work out, the letters build up. So it's A gap, B gap, C gap, and then D gap. And if you were to add a wing, we run a tight end wing set a lot of times, that adds even another gap out there. Defensively, as a coordinator, you've got to make sure you can fit guys in the gap. Theoretically, you would like to have at least one guy and maybe even kind of an overlap type player. When we talk about fits and that stuff, we'll get into that. What that means, like in this set right here, okay, let's just say that we're going to run a slant to the strong side with our defense. We've got to make sure we have a player assigned for every gap. Now, they don't have to run straight into that gap because offenses run different plays, but they're responsible for that gap. I know that by this, I have a hat on a hat. I've got at least a defensive player responsible for every spot that the ball could be run if it's going to hit inside or outside. Okay, so let's say we're running just a slant to the strong side. So we're going to assign our defensive lineman the gap over. Okay, there's a couple ways you can play your nose. I don't really want to get heavily in depth in that. I do have some different things in my book if you want to talk about two gapping or whatever we're going to do. I'm not a big believer in that at the high school level unless you just got a freak at nose. So usually we're going to have our nose assigned to one of the A gaps. In this case, he would have strong side. So not going to get into a whole lot of how we call strength, but to a tight end, we're probably going to call strength over there. So now A gap, our nose is responsible for that. Our tackle is now slanting to the strong side, so now he would have C gap. So that means our inside backer has to understand he is responsible for the B gap on play side. If the ball comes to your side, your fit should work towards the B gap. Okay? If we decided we wanted to run some kind of pinch where our tackle came inside, some kind of maybe stun or whatever, then we now know the A and B gap should be covered. So now our linebacker would fit C gap. Okay, you can even, if you wanted to get real exotic, you could bring your outside backer inside, and now he's responsible for D gap. Okay, the idea is we're going to have a guy responsible for every gap. So if these guys are responsible for A and B, I got to take C gap. That puts a little bit on your linebackers to learn the defense so they understand it. Then you work on the backside. Okay, what if they run to the quick side? Well, we're covering B gap with our tackle. So that means this linebacker has weak side A gap. All right? And then we've got an outside linebacker here who's going to cover the C gap, which in this case would basically be the force player. Or over here, our linebacker has D gap, which is essentially is a force player, which I'm going to get into in a later session. Whatever you decide to do with, whatever blitz you draw up, or whatever you decide to do with your kids, that's great. You have to make sure that you are fundamentally sound, that you have guys responsible for every gap. Because if you don't, I'm going to put my offensive coordinator hat on, I'm looking for what gap you're leaving uncovered. And that's where we're going to attack. So that's gap responsibility or gap integrity 101. Hope you got something from that. The next couple episodes in this station, we're going to go through what are keys, leverage and fits, coverage and match, and all that kind of stuff. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can go to my website. You actually get the whole book that goes through a lot more in depth on this, or go to CoachTube, and I've got courses specifically on different defensive topics you can go to. You can just look me up there, or just hit me up on Twitter or my email. I'll try to get back with you as quickly as I can. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't already done so, I appreciate if you give this a video a like and a subscribe. Trying to get viewership up a little bit on this station so I can continue to put out free information. Thank you.